9 children. 9 children died in open water in the United Kingdom during a single heat wave. Not in a country without safety systems, not in a place without laws, hospitals, or public services. In the United Kingdom, one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. 9 children drowned while trying to cool down in rivers, lakes, reservoirs, and canals during the record-breaking heat of May 2026. And researchers at Loughborough University are now saying, with absolute clarity, that those deaths were not simply tragedies. They were a symptom of a broken system, and they will keep happening unless the country wakes up to what is really going on. This video is not just about water safety. It is about who gets to be safe in a warming world. It is about why the children who die in open water are almost never the ones with access to private gardens, air-conditioned homes, family cars, and paid swimming lessons. It is about a gap, a deeply unfair, deeply structural gap, between the children who have somewhere cool and safe to go when temperatures hit 35 degrees, and the children who do not. And according to Loughborough University researcher Dr. Katie Parsons, that gap is a climate justice issue that society can no longer afford to ignore. Let's start with the numbers, because they are staggering. A major study analyzing almost 2,000 drowning deaths in the United Kingdom found that the risk of unintentional drowning increased by 7% for every single degree Celsius rise in daily maximum temperatures, with the danger rising sharply on the very hottest days, 7% per degree. That means that on a day like the 26th of May 2026, when temperatures at Kew Gardens in London hit 35.1 degrees Celsius, shattering the all-time record for the hottest May Day ever recorded in British history, the statistical risk of a child drowning was dramatically measurably higher than it would have been on a mild day in the 20s. The heat itself is the danger. Like and subscribe, because what comes next in this data will genuinely shock you. And the trend is only going one way. The Met Office has modeled what the UK's climate will look like by 2070, and the projection is alarming. Days exceeding 30 degrees Celsius, which were already extremely rare in Britain just a generation ago, could become 16 times more frequent over southern England compared to what they are today. 16 times more frequent. The conditions that drove children into rivers and reservoirs during the heat waves of 2025 and 2026 are not a new normal. Hey, are a preview of a far hotter future that is approaching faster than most people realize. And every time the temperature climbs, the pressure on children and teenagers to find water, any water, safe or not, intensifies. Because here is what the safety warnings always seem to miss. Children seeking water during a heat wave are not being reckless, or water offers relief from unbearable heat. It offers play, friendship, laughter, and escape. For teenagers in particular, gathering near rivers, canals, and lakes is part of how they socialize and navigate their local environments during hot weather. When the air temperature is pressing down on them, when their bedrooms are sweltering, and when every paved surface in their neighborhood is radiating stored heat back at them, finding water is not a bad decision. It is a survival instinct. The problem is not the instinct. The problem is what kind of water is available to them. And this is where the climate justice argument becomes impossible to dismiss. Not all children experience a heat wave the same way. Some children can retreat into homes with air conditioning, or at least with thick walls, good insulation, and shaded gardens. Some families can drive to the coast, book a holiday, pay for entry to a supervised outdoor Lido or indoor swimming pool. Some children live in houses with enough space to run a paddling pool in the back garden. But a significant number of children in the United Kingdom live in none of those conditions. They live in crowded flats in densely built urban neighborhoods where every window faces another wall. They live in homes that were built for a colder climate and trap heat like ovens. They live in areas with few parks, few trees, no outdoor pools, no shaded green spaces, and no affordable, safe places to cool down. The Climate Change Committee, the UK government's own independent climate advisor, has confirmed this is not a small or marginal problem. Its recent report found that by mid-century, 92% of existing homes in the UK are likely to overheat during heat waves. 92%. Homes built for a key-eye mate that no longer exists, now exposed to temperatures they were never designed to handle. And the Baroness Brown, chair of the Adaptation Committee, was blunt about the stakes. The UK, she said, was built for a climate that is increasingly distant from the one the country now faces. Drawing curtains and opening windows, the advice routinely given during heat waves, is simply not enough when outside temperatures are pushing into the mid-30s. Like and subscribe, because this overheating crisis is already inside people's homes right now. The National Housing Federation reported that overheating in UK homes is an unfolding public health crisis, made worse by the fact that lower-income households are the least able to do anything about it. They may not be able to afford fans. They almost certainly cannot afford air conditioning. If they are renting, they may not even be permitted to make changes to ventilation or add external shading. In 2023, a detailed monitoring project in Southwark, one of the hottest urban areas in England, found that every single home surveyed exceeded the World Health Organization's recommended maximum indoor temperature of 25 degrees Celsius during the summer. Every single one. Some households experienced temperatures over 30 degrees indoors for sustained periods of 15, 16, even 22 consecutive days, without a single break, without a single cool night, just unrelenting indoor heat week after week. When a child lives in a home like that, and the air outside is already 32 degrees, the nearest river is not a reckless temptation. It is the only option that makes any physical sense. This is the reality that Dr. Parsons and other researchers at Loughborough are insisting must be part of the conversation when we talk about heatwave drownings. The warning telling young people to stay away from open water is not wrong. Open water is genuinely dangerous, especially in heat, when the air temperature can disguise how cold the water beneath the surface actually is. Cold water shock, the involuntary gasp and muscle spasms triggered by sudden immersion in cold water, can incapacitate even strong, experienced swimmers within seconds. Hidden currents, submerged hazards, and underwater weeds add layers of danger that are completely invisible from the bank. The warnings are justified, but the warnings alone are not enough, because they do not address the conditions that make open water feel like the only choice. The National Child Mortality Database has analyzed child drowning deaths in England and reached a conclusion that should be front and center of every government discussion about heatwave policy. Children from the most disadvantaged backgrounds are more than twice as likely to drown compared to children from more affluent households. More than twice as likely. That disparity is not explained by water safety knowledge alone. It is explained by access, by infrastructure, by the fact that a child whose family can afford a swimming lesson, a day trip to a supervised beach, or membership at a local leisure center faces a fundamentally different risk environment than a child whose family cannot. The water does not discriminate, but the system absolutely does. The United Kingdom has lost a huge number of public swimming facilities over the past 2 decades. Local councils, squeezed by funding cuts, have closed hundreds of public pools across the country. The leisure centers and lidos that once served working-class communities as affordable, supervised, safe places to cool off and swim have either shut entirely or raised their prices to levels that price out the families who need them most. Meanwhile, the neighborhoods that have lost the most pools and green spaces are typically the same neighborhoods with the most crowded housing, the fewest trees, and the highest proportion of homes that overheat. The geography of heat vulnerability and the geography of safe cooling infrastructure are almost perfectly inversely aligned. The places with the hottest homes are the places with the fewest safe options for cooling down. The costs of climate change to public welfare in the UK could rise to between 1 and 5% of GDP by 2050, equivalent to somewhere between 60 and 260 billion pounds per year. The committee proposed spending approximately 11 billion pounds a year on adaptation measures, including cooling, investments in public services, shaded public spaces, and better insulated social housing. That is a fraction of the cost of doing nothing. But so far, the political response has not matched the scale of the problem. Like and subscribe. What happens next if this gap is not closed matters for every family in the country. Loughborough University's research sits within a broader academic movement that is insisting climate change cannot be understood purely as a technical or environmental problem. It is a social problem. It is a justice problem. Because the people who are most exposed to the worst effects of a warming climate are overwhelmingly the people who have contributed least to causing it. Low-income families and overcrowded urban flats did not drive the carbon emissions that are pushing UK temperatures into record-breaking territory. But they are the ones sleeping in 30-degree bedrooms, sending their children out into neighborhoods with no shade and no safe water, and absorbing the risks of a climate that the wealthiest segments of society helped create and can now largely afford to shield themselves from. Dr. Parsons frames this with precision. Climate justice is not only about who causes climate change. It is about who is most exposed to its effects, who has the fewest resources to adapt, and whose lives are absent from climate adaptation planning. Children in deprived communities are, in a very real and measurable sense, on the front line of the UK's climate emergency. And they are there not because of any choice they made, but because of where they were born, what their families can afford, and what their neighborhoods provide. That is a justice issue in the most fundamental meaning of the word. So what does meaningful action actually look like? Researchers and climate policy advocates are pointing toward a set of solutions that go well beyond telling teenagers to stay out of the water. They include serious public investment in accessible, affordable, supervised outdoor swimming spaces, lidos, splash parks, and open-air pools in the areas that need them most. They include urban design reform that prioritizes shade, trees, green corridors, and blue spaces in low-income neighborhoods. They include retrofitting social housing with better insulation and passive cooling technology so that the homes of the most vulnerable families do not become heat traps. They include making sure that every child has access to proper swimming education, not as a luxury or an optional extracurricular activity, but as a basic survival skill for a hotter country. Because the UK is getting hotter. That is not a projection anymore. It is a fact. The record that stood for over a century, the hottest May Day ever recorded, was broken not once, but twice within 24 hours in late May 2026. The Met Office has described these temperatures as historically unprecedented for this time of year. Climate scientists at Imperial College London have confirmed that the fingerprints of climate change are all over these events, and every additional degree of warming makes the next heat wave more likely, more intense, and more deadly, especially for children who have nowhere else to go but the nearest stretch of open water. 9 children died in the UK's heat wave of May 2026. 9 families are living with that loss, and Loughborough University's research is asking the rest of us to honor those lives by doing more than issuing warnings, by demanding the structural changes, the investment in infrastructure, and the recognition of climate justice that might prevent those losses from happening again. Because those children did not simply make a bad choice on a hot day. Tihei were the product of a system that left them with too few good ones. There's also the question of how schools, local authorities, and public health bodies communicate risk during heat waves. At the moment, the messaging tends to be reactive. Warnings go out when the temperature spikes, telling people to stay away from water. But this approach places all the responsibility onto individuals and families, while ignoring the structural reasons why those individuals and families have so few alternatives. A teenager who has spent 3 consecutive nights in a bedroom reaching 30 degrees, with no fan, no green space nearby, and no money for transport to the coast, does not need a warning. They need options. The warning is not wrong, but it is incomplete, and treating it as sufficient is a way of avoiding the harder and more expensive conversation about investment, infrastructure, and equity. The water safety statistics themselves offer a fuller picture of the scale of what is at stake. The National Water Safety Forum recorded 193 accidental water fatalities in the UK in 2024 alone. May consistently emerges as the month with the highest number of accidental drownings, exactly the period when unexpected warm spells arrive and children suddenly have both the heat and the freedom to seek out water. 61% of those deaths occur in inland waterways, the same rivers, canals, lakes, and reservoirs that sit closest to many of Britain's most deprived urban communities. These numbers are not random. They are the predictable output of a system that concentrates heat risk and removes safe alternatives in the same postcode simultaneously.